Hello and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be checking out a bit of a cult classic amp, one that's definitely got an underground following, especially in the metal world. It's an amp that's been used by the likes of Death, Cannibal Corpse, Static X and even Oasis. I am of course talking about the Marshall Valvestate model 8100. Today we're going to be going through some tones and finding out whether it really is just a metal machine or whether it is more versatile than people think it is. So just for a little bit of background before we get into the tones, the Marshall Valvestate series was introduced in the 1990s and was Marshall's more budget range when compared to the JCM flagships. Now these are hybrid amplifiers, so what that means is that they're part solid state in the power section, but they do have a valve preamp, at least on the boost channel. I'll say a bit more about that when we get into the amp. So these were Marshall's budget amps, which would then eventually go on to be replaced by the awful MG series of amps. But as these were Marshall's budget models, they were always fairly affordable. And even now, although certain models, such as the 8100, are more desirable, they can still be picked up fairly cheap. This one I have here that I've bought myself, I picked up for less than £250. So let's get into the amp. So this is a 2-channel amplifier, although each of the channels has 2 modes which can be switched by these dip switches. You have your normal channel, which has a gain control and a 3-band EQ. You then have your boost channel, which has a gain control, again a 3-band EQ, as well as the famous contour knob. It then also has a volume. You then have a send and return for your effects loop, which has a 20 dB pad, and quite a nice touch that you don't often see on amplifiers is a blend control for the effects loop. You've then got an inbuilt spring reverb and the overall master volume. You've also got a line out and a connection for a foot switch. But I'm not using the line out today. Everything you're hearing is coming out of the back of the amp and into a 2 notes torpedo captor. That's then running into Logic, and I'm using a Zilla Cabs Vintage 30 IR. And the guitar I'm playing today is my PRS S2 single cut semi-hollow, which is in D standard. So let's get into some tones. Now we'll start over on the normal channel, but I'm going to keep this brief because really this isn't the reason you buy this amp. Now, as I alluded to at the start of the video, although this amp does have a valve preamp tube in it, that isn't used for the normal channel. So the normal channel is entirely solid state. It's only when you switch over to the boost channel that 112AX7 gets kicked in. So on the clean channel, on the neck pickup, it sounds like this. And then if I press in the crunch control, so as you can hear, it's fine, it's probably usable in a pinch, but it's not what I would gravitate towards for a clean tone, especially if I'm recording. But I'm breezing past this because really this isn't the reason you buy this amp. You buy this amp for the dirty tones. So let's switch over to the boost channel, and on the bridge pickup with the settings that you can see, it sounds like this. I'm going to bump the gain up a bit to about 3 o'clock now, and that sounds like this. So as you can hear, a pretty good rock tone, not the most gain in the world, but a pretty good saturated tone. I'll come back to this setting later when we talk about the versatility of this amp. So moving on really to the setting that this amp is mainly known for, and that is the OD2 setting on the boost channel. So as you can hear, that's what this amp's really known for, those high gain sort of metal tones, and it's very sort of 90s death metal. So while we're on this setting, we should probably talk about the contour knob, because that's something that often gets talked about with this amp, and I think is part of the reason that especially the death metal bunch gravitated towards this amp. So what this knob does is it gives you extra tone shaping outside of the 3-band EQ. With the contour down low, it's almost like rolling off your tone knob. It gives you a bit of a bass boost and takes away all the treble. Going the other way clockwise towards where it says high and gets you into that 90s death metal sort of area. So what I'll do is I'll just play some chugs and roll the control from its lowest to its highest setting just so you can hear the range. So as you can hear, it makes quite a drastic difference. To me, having it to the left of midday puts you in more sort of new metal territory. And then taking it round to the right really gives you that classic sound you'd expect to hear from Chuck Schuldiner and Death. So as I've already said, that's really the iconic sound that this amp's known for. But that brings us on quite nicely to the question of, is that all this amp can do? Now, as I said earlier, I'm going to go back to that OD1 setting and I'm going to switch guitars quickly. So this is my Gretsch G2655 with Filtertron pickups, and this is in E standard. And I've switched to that because I want to go back to the OD1 channel. I'm going to put the gain at about 3 o'clock. And I'm going to have the contour just at about midday, because this, to me at least, immediately gives you the sound of Oasis from the first few records. So as you can hear, it does do rock tones pretty well as well. And as I said at the start of this video, this amp has been used on quite a lot of stuff because of how accessible it was at its lower price. If you wanted a Marshall JCM sort of sound but you couldn't afford it, you bought this. So really, to answer the question of whether this is just a metal machine, I don't think it is. But I think you want to stay in the world of distortion with this amp. The clean channel is fine, and for the odd section here and there, especially in a live setting, would be fine. It's nothing to write home about. And I do find it quite dark actually. I don't know if you noticed earlier when we were looking at it, but I do boost the treble quite a lot. But if you're looking for sort of that Marshall-esque, higher headroom and slightly more old school sort of sound, then I don't think you can go wrong, especially with the sort of prices you can pick these things up for at the moment. Although I have a feeling that with them being so popular in certain areas of metal, that these will eventually start to climb, being a bit of a cult classic. But there you go, so there's a look at the Marshall Valvestate 8100. A 90s death metal icon, but as we found out, also more than that. Leave me a comment down below on your thoughts on the Valvestate and what your favourite band that uses them is. And if you haven't already, check out my History of Marshall video to find out where the Valvestate fits in relative to all of Marshall's other models. But that's it from me, so as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.